October 12, 1974. Three children, Evelyn Harper, Thomas Clarkson, and Jeremy Miles, step off an old rural road and into the woods at dusk. Their voices float in the air, playful, innocent, unaware of the fact that the moment their feet cross that invisible threshold, they are no longer on ordinary ground. The townspeople always felt it, that subtle chill when you drive past the tree line, the sudden weight in your chest when you even look toward that ravine. But they buried those instincts beneath logic and reason, because admitting the truth would mean admitting that we are not the highest force in this world. The sky grows darker, the wind stalls, birdsong ceases as if nature itself refuses to witness what is about to unfold. The children laugh quietly, stepping over the moss-covered stones like thousands before them, not realizing they are being watched. From a distance through the black-leafed branches, she observes the one they once called the Hollow Witch. She doesn't walk, she doesn't breathe, she simply waits, patient and ancient, tethered to the forest by a pact so old it predates the town itself. At exactly 6:41 p.m., the first child stops and tilts his head, hearing something the others don't. A faint melody, almost gentle, almost loving, a lullaby. He smiles, because children do not fear a song. And that is where the lie begins. This isn't just a disappearance, this is a ritual, a calling, a debt paid every few decades to something the early settlers tried to silence. You weren't supposed to hear this, but now that you have, you're already stepping closer to the tree line. The melody winds between the trees like a living thing, curling around the children's ankles and pulling them forward before they even realize they're moving. Thomas glances back, suddenly aware that the road behind them feels farther than it should be, as if the path itself has stretched. Evelyn whispers that they should turn around, but Jeremy is already stepping ahead, eyes half-focused, drawn to a sound so soft and beautiful it almost doesn't belong to this world. None of them ask why they can hear a woman's voice singing deep within the forest when no one is supposed to live out there. Children do not question beauty, and that is precisely why they are useful to those ancient forces that still haunt forgotten places. At 6:48 p.m., the townspeople start to realize something is wrong. Dinner tables sit empty, televisions flicker in untouched living rooms. A father steps out into the road calling for his son, only to be answered by silence and the distant rustling of leaves. Minutes pass, then hours. Panic rises like a slow tide. By 8:12 p.m., the first search party enters Black Hollow Forest. Lanterns glow in shaking hands. Men call the children's names as they move through the heavy brush. But those calls never carry far. The forest absorbs sound in a way no ordinary woodland should, like a mouth swallowing every name before it can truly be spoken. And then, it happens. A deputy hears the lullaby. He raises his lantern and points into the fog. For a brief, horrifying moment, he sees a slender woman in a black Victorian dress standing perfectly still between two oaks, watching them. Her face is pale, stretched, empty, as if someone removed every feature and left nothing but smooth porcelain skin where eyes and mouth should be. The lantern flickers. She vanishes. The deputy stumbles backward and whispers, "She's awake." But here's the truth they never put in the official report. She isn't searching for the children. She already has the children. She's searching for the men who would dare to take them back. And now those men are stepping deeper into her domain. They tell themselves it's just a search, just lanterns, flashlights, well-trained men doing their duty. But Black Hollow is not a place you search. It is a place that studies you, measuring your fear, memorizing your heartbeat, deciding how it will break you. At 9:03 p.m., the second group moves past the ravine. The air grows colder. Lantern flames shrink as if suffocated by something unseen. One of the men mutters a prayer he barely remembers. Another keeps glancing over his shoulder, convinced someone is following them. But every time they turn, there is nothing there, just trees swaying slightly, as if trying not to laugh. They find the first sign at 9:14 p.m., a child's handprint pressed into the bark of an old oak, perfectly formed, fresh, the size of Evelyn's hand. But there is no mud leading up to it, no footprints, just that one handprint. 7 feet off the ground, Jeremy's mother, standing at the forest's edge with the other families, suddenly screams. She claims she heard her son's voice right beside her whispering, "I'm here, follow the singing." But when they rush toward the sound, there is nothing but darkness waiting. At 9:46 p.m., a volunteer breaks away from the group, following the lullaby he believes belongs to his own daughter who died years earlier. That is the first disappearance within the search party. The man is never seen again, but his flashlight is later found, impaled into the earth, pointed straight down, as if lighting the entrance to an invisible pit. The rest of the men start arguing. Some want to push forward, to rescue the children. Others insist it's already too late. They're both wrong, because rescuing the children was never the real purpose of this night. The forest doesn't just want their bodies, it wants their belief, their agreement. It wants them to look into the darkness and finally accept what their grandparents tried to bury, that the world is not governed by man, but by ancient covenants made in blood and silence, and Black Hollow is just one of many places where those covenants still breathe. By 10:13 p.m., the search party has fractured into isolated clusters, each convinced they're moving in the right direction. They are not. The forest has already rearranged itself, paths looping, moss growing over freshly placed footprints, trees shifting like sentinels quietly closing ranks behind them. What began as a search has now become a silent procession, not toward the missing children, but toward something that has been waiting to be found. Two men reach an old clearing rarely shown on modern maps. At its center stands a broken stone altar, half buried and engraved with symbols older than any church in the county. A rusted iron nail sits in the center of the stone, driven through a bundle of black fabric. The men try to pull the nail free, but the moment they touch it, the lullaby grows louder, now accompanied by the soft overlapping voices of children humming along. One of the men begins to cry, not out of fear, but recognition. He whispers that his grandmother once told him this melody, warning him never to repeat it aloud because it belongs to her. He never said who "her" was, but every old family in Black Hollow knew. In that moment, the men finally understand. This wasn't a random disappearance, this was a payment. Every few decades, the forest calls, a voice sings, children follow, and in return the town is left untouched by plague, famine, war. It is not a blessing, it is a pact. One of the men collapses to his knees, horrified as the truth sinks in. We didn't lose the children. We gave them. In the distance, the woman in black appears again, standing completely still, her empty face raised toward the sky. She does not approach. She waits, knowing that once they understand the truth, the men will walk to her willingly. Because the most powerful form of control is not force, it is consent. And once you realize the world is ruled by hidden agreements, you begin to wonder which of your own choices were ever truly yours. 10:44 p.m. The search party is now silent. No one dares call the children's names anymore because they've realized something soul-shattering. The children might answer, but it wouldn't truly be them anymore. One man grips his lantern so tightly his knuckles turn white. He says nothing. He just stares at the ravine ahead. A black wound in the earth, pulsing with the same lullaby that first led the children into the forest. The melody no longer sounds gentle, it sounds hungry. Another man finally breaks and whispers, "We never should have dug that mine back in '72. The others turn. He continues, voice shaking. "That wasn't ore we hit down there. It was something else, something that shouldn't have been disturbed." The men exchange horrified looks, because that mining record was sealed by county officials and filed under structural hazard. It was a lie. The forest wasn't cursed because of what lived there. It was cursed because of what we released. At 10:58 p.m., they reach the ravine. Their lanterns dim instantly, as if the air itself devours the light. Down below, through the twisting roots and black mist, they see them. 3 small figures standing perfectly still. Evelyn, Thomas, Jeremy. But there's something wrong with their faces. Their eyes are black, their mouths are closed. Yet the lullaby still pours out from them like smoke. Behind them, the witch stands. Her head tilts slowly, acknowledging the men as though she's been expecting this exact moment for decades. This is the real ritual. She doesn't just take the children. She uses them as vessels to lure the fathers. Because she feeds on bloodline, not flesh, the corruption must run through generations in order to bind the town to her forever. One of the men drops to his knees and begins reciting the lullaby in a broken voice, not because he wants to, but because the song has already taken root in his mind. And if you're still listening to this, if the melody has started replaying in the back of your head, don't ignore it. That's how the binding begins. The ravine breathes. The trees lean inward. And the men finally understand why no map accurately marks this place. Because this is not ordinary geography. It's an interface, a crossing point where the physical world overlaps something older, darker, and infinitely more intelligent. At 11:07 p.m., the witch raises her hand, not as a threat, but as an invitation. One of the men steps forward. He doesn't scream. He doesn't pray. He walks almost peacefully, like someone returning home after a long exile. Because the moment a man recognizes the architecture of control, when he sees with his own eyes that this world is ruled by hidden covenants and not coincidence, his resistance breaks. And that is when the real possession begins. At the top of the ravine, another man tries to pull his friend back. The moment he makes contact, he hears it. Not the lullaby, but the children's voices whispering directly into his ear. "Don't try to save us. Save yourself." He releases his grip and stumbles backward as if burned. The witch doesn't move. She doesn't need to. Her power isn't in her body. It's in what she represents. A system of obedience so old that even remembering its existence feels like blasphemy. The men stand frozen as the three children begin to sing again. But this time, the melody is joined by other voices, dozens of them, stretching back through the decades, each one belonging to a child once reported missing from Black Hollow. You begin to realize something horrifying. It has never been three children. It has always been all of them, bound together, generation after generation, forming a choir of obedience. And that choir is the source of her power. One by one, the men lower their lanterns and listen, not out of fear, but recognition. Because deep down, all men know it. We have been singing someone else's song our entire lives. 11:19 p.m. A thick, suffocating stillness blankets the ravine, the kind of silence that makes a man feel like he's standing inside someone else's heartbeat. The search party is no longer searching. They have been reduced to something simpler, quieter, like instruments waiting to be played. One man drops his lantern. The flame sputters and dies instantly, swallowed by the damp earth. He tries to speak, but what leaves his mouth isn't a word. It's a note. A single tone that harmonizes perfectly with the lullaby echoing from the children below. He covers his mouth in horror. Too late. The witch tilts her head again and smiles without a mouth. Because this is how it happens, not through violence, but through participation. The moment a man accepts the melody, he becomes part of it. A living vessel, another instrument in the choir. The others start backing away, trembling. One finally snaps, shouting that this is madness and turning to run back up the path. But he stops suddenly. Standing directly in front of him is a small girl in a white dress. She doesn't move. Her eyes are hollow, her skin gray. And in her tiny hand, she holds a piece of blood-stained lace torn from a Victorian gown. She opens her mouth. But the sound that comes out is not a child's voice. It's the witch's voice. Ancient and broken, speaking through the child like a puppet. "Come back." The man collapses. His lantern shatters at his feet. And just like that, another instrument is added to the song. At the edge of the forest, far away from the ravine, the townspeople hear the lullaby drift through their windows and feel an instinct older than memory telling them not to close their curtains. Because deep in their subconscious, they remember the truth. Some doors must remain open, or the thing on the other side will force its way in. And tonight, that door is the forest itself. 11:37 p.m. Only 3 men remain conscious at the edge of the ravine, each clinging to the last fragments of disbelief. They refuse to let go because they understand something the others didn't. Once you believe the lullaby is real, you belong to it forever. So they close their eyes, they cover their ears, they stumble backward, whispering fragments of prayers or childhood memories, anything to drown out the melody. But the forest adapts. The lullaby sinks beneath the surface of their thoughts and resurfaces in a different form. A memory. One man suddenly hears his deceased mother calling his name, begging him to come home. Another hears his child's voice laughing just beyond the trees. They know it isn't real. But knowing the truth isn't enough to save you. Not when the manipulation is emotional, not logical. At 11:41 p.m., the witch steps forward. The children remain motionless, eyes black, mouths closed, but the song grows louder. The witch raises her arms, and for the first time the forest responds. Branches twist overhead, forming an arch above the ravine. Roots pulse beneath the soil like veins. It is no longer a forest. It is a temple. One man drops to his knees and finally speaks the words the witch has waited decades to hear. We accept. In that moment, the melody stops. Complete silence. The witch lowers her arms. The three children slowly turn and face the men, their mouths still closed, their eyes softening for a single heartbeat, as if some small part of them, the part that remembers sunlight and laughter, briefly returns. Then it's gone. The children step forward and vanish into the blackness behind the witch. The men follow, willingly, because once you accept the system, you no longer fear it, you serve it. And the most terrifying part, the next day, the town calls those men heroes. They say they gave everything to find the children, and no one dares to speak the deeper truth. They completed the ritual that keeps the town alive. Dawn breaks over Black Hollow with deceptive softness. Golden light touching the treetops, birds cautiously returning to their branches as if nothing happened. The townspeople gather at the edge of the forest, holding one another, whispering prayers, pretending they believe rescue is still possible. But deep down, every man there feels it. The exchange has already been made. The children will not return, and yet, life in the town will go on. Milk will be delivered, shops will open, crops will grow without disease, because the price has been paid in full. Just as it was in 1896, 1874, and every forgotten generation before them. At 7:12 a.m., a search captain emerges from the forest alone. He says nothing at first, just collapses to his knees, eyes hollow, skin pale. The townspeople rush to him, begging for answers, but all he can do is whisper a single sentence over and over like a broken record. She sang, and we obeyed. The sheriff writes that statement into his official report, then crosses it out so it will never be read by anyone outside the county. That is how institutional manipulation works, not by telling you a lie, but by forcing you to bury the truth with your own hands. Later that night, while the town tries to sleep, a single voice begins humming, soft, far away. Most try to ignore it, yet they still turn their heads toward the sound in the dark. Because human beings are drawn to songs, even when they know those songs lead to ruin. And that, right there, is the deepest design of the system. Teach men to love the very thing that consumes them. Make them call it tradition, sacrifice, even faith. By the time they realize it's a mechanism of control, the melody is already inside them, rewriting their decisions, shaping their bloodline, guiding them toward the next transaction. Tell me honestly, do you really think the witch lives only in that forest, or is she simply a symbol of the hidden forces that have been singing to you since the day you were born? You were never meant to see the pattern, but once you do, it becomes impossible to unsee. Black Hollow isn't an isolated tale of tragedy. It's a template, a mechanism repeated across history under different names and in different landscapes, always designed to condition obedience through loss. Look closely, and you'll notice the same structure buried inside the world's most unexplained disappearances. A mysterious place, a seemingly random tragedy, a ritual denied in public yet preserved in private, and always, the silence afterward, the way towns fall back into order as if nothing ever happened. Why? Because chaos alone doesn't create control. Control is forged through fear and order coexisting. Fear to weaken the spirit, order to bind it. In the case of Black Hollow, the lullaby is the tool, a melody passed down from an older, pre-Christian cult that believed sound could open a doorway between dimensions. They didn't worship the witch as a literal being. They worshipped what stood behind her, a non-human intelligence that feeds on ritual, obedience, and long-term emotional submission. It requires souls the way kings require taxes, not for sustenance but for the maintenance of power. Understand this. The children were not the target, they were the lever. Because men will do far more in the name of protecting the innocent than they ever would for themselves. That is why the lullaby is sung in a woman's voice. That is why the witch appears not as a monster, but as something almost human. Because true manipulation doesn't scare you away, it makes you move closer on your own. And here's the part that should unsettle you the most. The lullaby doesn't end in the forest. It spreads. Through stories, through memory, through the very act of listening. Which means that by staying with this video, by following this path of forbidden history to this exact moment, you've already heard the first verse. The only question now is, will you keep listening or look away and pretend you never did? Fear alone is never enough to control men. That's why the system always offers something in return: security, prosperity, protection, purpose. After the 1974 disappearances, Black Hollow reported its highest agricultural yield in 60 years. No disease, no animal attacks. Not a single major crime for almost a decade. They called it the blessing, but it wasn't a blessing, it was the harvest. And here's what most people miss. The real power of a ritual isn't in the act itself, but in the collective silence that follows. Every citizen who hears the lullaby and chooses to say nothing becomes part of the structure. Every man who senses that something is off and still goes back to his daily routine contributes another stone to the altar. You feel that in your own life, don't you? You see institutions making decisions that make no rational sense. You feel the pressure to obey systems that serve no one and consume everything. Somewhere deep inside, you know something else is steering all of it. Something that doesn't care about your well-being, only your compliance. That isn't paranoia. That isn't pessimism. That is an instinct that's trying desperately to wake you up. Because the truth is this. The same force that sang to those children in Black Hollow sings to every society that has ever traded innocence for stability. It's not always a lullaby. Sometimes it's a broadcast, a slogan, a promise repeated so many times that it becomes scripture. Do not question. Trust the system. This is for your safety. Different lyrics, same melody, and the moment you start hearing it for what it really is, a ritual of control, you're no longer merely a listener. You become a threat, and the system does not tolerate threats. You're beginning to understand why they never taught you this in school. Why every reference to the Black Hollow disappearances is reduced to a local legend. Because once you see that rituals of control still operate in modern society, you start asking dangerous questions: who oversees them, who benefits from them, and most importantly, who designed them? The answer is not simple. It's not a single organization or cult. It's a network of institutions built over centuries and bound together by one unspoken principle: order must be maintained at any cost. After the 1974 incident, several state officials quietly arrived in Black Hollow, not to investigate, but to sanitize. They removed evidence from the ravine, confiscated the sheriff's original journal, and forced local media to label the case a tragic disappearance. Nothing about the witch, nothing about the song, nothing about the mine that should never have been opened. But here's what they didn't remove: the pattern. A year later, a similar case occurred on the outskirts of Melrose, Kentucky. Another forest, another unknown female apparition, 3 more children gone. Then, in 1988, in a small Bavarian village, the same melody was reportedly heard by locals moments before 2 children disappeared near a stone well. None of these cases were connected publicly. But if you overlay the dates and locations on a global map, a geometric pattern begins to emerge. Something too precise to be random, a grid, a circuit. Whatever force stands behind the witch is not bound to one place. It moves from region to region, reenacting the same ritual again and again, amplifying its power through repetition. And the most chilling part, each site becomes permanently altered after the ritual, as if reality itself has been rewritten in that location. Black Hollow now appears darker on satellite imagery than any surrounding forest, as if the trees are absorbing more light than they should, as if the land is no longer entirely part of our world. And if that can happen to a forest, what makes you think it hasn't already happened to whole cities? There is a reason you've never found this information in official archives, because the institutions tasked with protecting society are often the same ones that administer the ritual itself, not openly, not in boardrooms, but through carefully engineered moments where fear, confusion, and obedience converge, and the population willingly trades awareness for comfort. After Black Hollow, a quiet directive was issued at the county level: no further inquiry into ceremonial or paranormal speculation connected to the disappearance. Anyone who persisted lost their position, their funding, or their reputation. It wasn't censorship, it was containment. The sheriff died 6 months later, heart failure, they said. Yet rumors spread that on the night of his death, neighbors heard the lullaby coming from inside his house. You see, the ritual doesn't end when you leave the forest. Once you've heard it, once you've allowed it to enter your awareness, the binding has already begun. That's why men who try to expose it always fall first. Not because they're weak, but because the system has already mapped their minds and knows exactly which fear will silence them. And you need to understand something very clearly right now. What happened in Black Hollow is not just a story of the past. It is a model being deployed wherever populations become too numb, too distracted, too willing to obey. They don't need to drag you into the ravine anymore. They just need you to listen, to accept the narrative, to internalize the message. Stay silent, trust the song, do not ask where it leads. But you're still here, still listening, still aware. That means you haven't surrendered yet. The deeper we go, the more the system will try to distract you. But if you push through that discomfort, past the fear, something changes. You stop being a listener and start becoming the one who hears. Most people believe control is maintained through force, laws, weapons, punishment. That's a convenient illusion. True control is psychological, ritualistic, predictive. It's about conditioning you to feel safest when you are most compliant. That's why societies throughout history create stories of monsters at the edge of civilization, not to protect you, but to keep you from ever wandering beyond the approved borders. Black Hollow is one of those borders, and what makes it truly dangerous isn't the witch. It's the fact that the town accepted her. Parents knew the stories, elders remembered the melody, yet they still allowed the children to walk that road. Why? Because deep down, they believed the sacrifice was worth it, as long as the crops grew, as long as war stayed far away, as long as the witch kept singing to someone else. Look closely and you'll realize that same logic exists today, whispered through modern institutions. Yes, a few must suffer, but it's for the stability of the many. Yes, there are things we must never question, but that's what keeps us safe. It's the same lullaby, just translated into policy, media, education, and fear. The men of Black Hollow didn't walk into the ravine because they were weak. They walked because the system had convinced them that obedience was righteous, that participation was heroic, that questioning the ritual would doom everyone, and it worked. The witch didn't need chains, she didn't need violence, she needed only one thing: agreement, and she got it. Now imagine how many of today's institutions operate on that exact same principle. Imagine how many times you've been told to obey for the good of all, how many times you've silenced your own instinct because the melody sounded comforting. That's not coincidence, that's design. And until a man can face the truth that he has been trained to participate in, his own spiritual erosion, he will keep marching deeper into the ravine, smiling, obedient, believing he's doing the right thing. Let's go deeper. After the incident, 2 of the surviving men were quietly moved to a psychiatric ward outside the county. Their official diagnoses: acute shared delusional disorder. But the attending physician left a private note in the medical file, never meant to be seen by the public. It read, "They keep asking me if I can hear the song too." What terrified him wasn't their insanity, it was their consistency. Both men described the same figure, a woman in black with a faceless smile, and both insisted the song was not in their ears, but already inside their thoughts. That's how these control systems evolve. Once the physical ritual is complete, the psychological infection begins. No forest required, no altar necessary. just a memory, a melody, implanted in the mind like a seed waiting to blossom the moment obedience is required. Think about that. How many beliefs in your own life came from direct experience, and how many were simply placed there by repetition? How many of your fears, loyalties, and opinions were shaped by forces you can't even name? Society is filled with modern ravens and modern black hollows, places and events that appear random, but are designed to normalize trauma, encourage passivity, and reinforce allegiance to hidden systems. And the price is always the same: the loss of innocence, not just of individuals, but of entire civilizations. One generation hears the song and falls. The next grows up believing the song is normal. The third can't even imagine a world without it. That is the real victory of the witch. Not that she took 3 children, but that the town eventually forgot anything was taken at all. Ask yourself, when did we forget? Most viewers think the horror ends where history ends, as if darkness can be sealed behind a date and filed away like an old archive. But you and I both know that's not how it works. History is not a straight line, it's a cycle. And once a ritual proves effective, it's repeated, perfected, scaled. Black Hollow was never simply an event. It was a prototype. In 1997, 3 teenagers disappeared near the ruins of St. Eustace Church in North Carolina. Police found an abandoned camcorder, no footage of a struggle, no sign of the teens, only 5 minutes of audio, wind, footsteps, and a faint female voice humming the exact same lullaby. The files were never released to the public. In 2011, tourists camping near Aokigahara Forest in Japan reported hearing a woman singing in English. A search team found no trace of her, but discovered an old Victorian shoe buried under a cedar tree. Wrong continent, wrong century, same pattern. What this tells you is simple. The witch is not a single entity tied to one place. She is the embodiment of a mechanism, an ancient architecture of control that moves through time, culture, and language. Her physical form may change, her song may take different shapes, but the outcome is always the same: obedience, sacrifice, silence. And that is why you must be careful right now, because as you listen, part of you is starting to recognize how many everyday rituals in your own life resemble what happened in Black Hollow. And once you recognize it, you have 2 choices: reject it and regain your sovereignty, or deny it and become part of the choir. Understand, the system wants you to choose the latter. It's safer when you cling to ignorance. It's safer when you call this just storytelling, because the moment you admit it feels real, the melody reaches you. If you're still here, it means your instinct hasn't been fully silenced, and that alone puts you in a different category of men. Most people would have already clicked away, dismissed this as folklore, and gone back to their carefully curated illusions. But you're still listening, and the deeper you listen, the more the pattern begins to reveal itself. Because this isn't just about ancient forests or faceless witches. It's about how control hides itself behind ritual, and how ritual hides itself behind tradition, entertainment, and public safety. Look at any major institution around you. Governments, churches, media empires, educational systems. They all follow the same structure. Identify a fear, provide a comforting melody, lead the obedient toward a pre-designed outcome. Call it protection. Repeat, that's not administration, that's spellcasting. You think the witch is frightening because she steals children? Understand this, they don't need to steal the body if they can capture the mind. That's why the lullaby always sounds different to each person. To the desperate father, it sounds like his lost child. To the obedient citizen, it sounds like safety. To the broken man, it sounds like forgiveness. The system knows exactly which melody will make you walk into the ravine willingly, and that is the real danger, because once you start walking, the path adjusts. It brings you deeper, it seals shut behind you, until the day you look back and realize you can no longer remember why you started following in the first place. That's when the ritual is complete, and that's why you must keep listening with your eyes open, refusing the melody, even when it sounds like something you've waited your whole life to hear. The truth doesn't sing, it disrupts, and disruption is the only way out. Black Hollow teaches a brutal lesson. A man who does not recognize the ritual will eventually become part of it. The sheriff didn't want to participate, neither did the miners, neither did the parents. Yet step by step, word by word, they were led into agreement with something that devours innocence and replaces it with unquestioning obedience. Remember, they didn't accept the witch because they were evil. They accepted her because they were afraid. And fear, when left unchecked, always seeks comfort, even if that comfort is drenched in blood. This is where most people fail. They recognize the corruption, they sense the manipulation, but instead of confronting it, they look for a softer melody, a more pleasant lie. And before long, they are singing along again. The men who survived Black Hollow never escaped the ritual. They carried it. Some took their own lives. Others became silent, hollow versions of themselves, shadows wearing human skin. Because once the melody enters your thoughts, it rewrites your will. That's exactly what the larger system wants for you. Not to kill you, but to convert you. To turn your curiosity into compliance. Your awareness into resignation, your power into obedience. So let me be painfully clear. If you continue listening, you will reach a point of no return, a point where the truth becomes too heavy to ignore and too dangerous to forget. Most men retreat before they reach it. The question is, will you? Because the next step is not safe. The next step reveals why the forest was allowed to exist, who ensured the ritual survived, and what is waiting beyond the witch herself. If you are ready to keep going, we continue. If not, stop listening now. Very few ever choose to proceed. Those who do usually reach the same chilling realization. The witch is not the origin of the ritual. She is the guardian of it. Behind her, behind the ravine and the song and the disappearing children, lies something far older, something that doesn't appear in human form because it doesn't need to. It exists as influence, as invisible architecture. The witch is simply its envoy, its mouthpiece, its ambassador to the human world. In the Black Hollow Sheriff's hidden journal, the one confiscated and sealed, there was a line scribbled in the back margin that was never meant to be read. The woman in black is not a woman at all. She is the reflection of our obedience given form. Think about that. A manifestation of collective submission. A physical embodiment of every time a man knew the truth and remained silent. Every ritual needs a symbol, something the people can look at, fear, and obey. The witch became that symbol, but the power, the intelligence, sits behind her, untouched and anonymous. For centuries, that intelligence has tested human populations the way a scientist tests a sample. Introduce fear, measure the reaction, reward obedience, refine the next ritual. Black Hollow was one test site. There are hundreds more, and the reason you haven't heard about them isn't because the evidence doesn't exist. It's because the participants become so psychologically bound to the ritual that they protect it with their own lives. When obedience becomes identity, truth becomes the enemy. That's why men attacked the few who tried to speak about the witch after 1974. That's why every official record was sanitized. It wasn't just institutional suppression, it was communal defense of the ritual. Because once you accept the melody, you defend the melody. Now ask yourself, how many melodies in your life are you defending without even realizing it? By now, the pattern should be painfully clear. Rituals of control do not require belief. They only require participation. Most of the men in Black Hollow didn't believe in witches. They didn't believe in old forest gods or sacrifice or the supernatural, and none of that mattered. Because the ritual was designed to function even without belief, it only needed them to take the steps, speak the words, follow the melody. And they did. Just like people today follow policies written by unseen hands, repeat narratives they never verified, and defend systems they know are slowly hollowing them out. That's the modern ravine. It's not beneath the forest floor. It's beneath the surface of culture. A carefully engineered path that leads men into silence and submission while convincing them they're making responsible choices. Black Hollow just showed us the mechanics: lead with fear, soothe with ritual, seal with silence. And here is where the deeper horror begins. In 2019, a classified intelligence memo leaked briefly on a darknet forum. It referenced the Black Hollow case not as folklore, but as an early example of environmental psychoacoustic ritual propagation. One highlighted sentence: "The entity's influence appears to scale in proportion to the number of human minds passively receiving the ritual signal." Do you understand what that means? The system no longer needs to bring people to the forest. It only needs to bring the forest to them, through broadcasts, music, media, trending stories engineered to activate the same emotional circuitry as the original lullaby. The song evolves, the witch evolves, the ritual remains the same. And here you are, still listening, still stepping, still descending. So I'll ask again, not to scare you, but to prepare you. Are you willing to go even deeper, knowing you might never see the world the same way again? Because the next section won't be about the forest. It will be about you. Imagine for a moment that the witch is not a separate being, but a mirror. A reflection of a deeper truth our ancestors understood, but we have forgotten. When a society abandons its own spiritual sovereignty, something else will occupy the empty space. In Black Hollow, that something else took the form of a woman in a black dress, because that was the symbol the townspeople feared and respected. But symbols are flexible. In your world, it may not look like a witch. It may look like a government logo, a corporate slogan, a doctrine repeated in polite conversation until disagreement becomes impossible. Different face, same hunger. And the reason this matters is because once you see the symbol for what it is, every other layer begins to collapse. You start noticing how certain melodies are repeated in newspapers, classrooms, advertisements, even your own internal dialogue. You start questioning why fear is always followed by a convenient solution, and why that solution always demands the same thing: your obedience. At first, it's disorienting, like realizing the road you've been walking your whole life has been slowly bending toward a destination you never chose. That's how some men feel when they step into Black Hollow for the first time. The trees look normal, until they suddenly don't. The path feels familiar, until it shifts beneath your feet. Then comes the final breaking point, the realization that the forest has been guiding you, not the other way around. You might be reaching that point now, and the system can sense it, so it will try to pull you back with more pleasant melodies, comfort, entertainment, distraction, anything to keep you from continuing this descent. Because once you cross the threshold of awareness, you can't be controlled the same way again. And the closer you get to that threshold, the louder the song will whisper, "Turn back, turn back, turn back." Let me warn you now, this is where most men break. Not because the truth is too complex, but because it is too simple. They want evil to look dramatic. Claws, fire, monsters hiding in shadows. They want the witch to be some demonic creature they can point to and say, "There, that is the enemy." But the real enemy is far quieter. It smiles. It gives you what you think you want. It asks for very little at first. A small silence, a minor compromise, a harmless ritual repeated in the name of tradition. And every time you comply, it moves a little closer, until the melody is no longer outside of you. It's coming from within. That's what happened to the survivors of Black Hollow. They didn't need to return to the forest. They carried the forest inside their minds wherever they went. Some began hearing the lullaby in their dreams. Others started seeing the witch's figure in reflections. Not attacking, not speaking, just observing, as if checking whether they still remembered the terms of the agreement. That's when it becomes irreversible, when the ritual has fused with your identity. Let me put it plainly. The greatest lie the system ever taught you is that obedience makes you safe. It doesn't. It only makes you predictable. And predictability is the most valuable commodity for any controlling force. The witch doesn't need to hunt unpredictable men. She needs them to predict themselves right into the ravine, and most do. Not because they are weak, but because no one ever told them that obedience can be a form of possession. Now someone is telling you. So ask yourself, and ask honestly, Have you heard a melody in your life that made you move without thinking, a belief you adopted without proof, a fear that guided your footsteps before you even understood why? If so, then Black Hollow isn't just a place in Pennsylvania, it's a reflection of the world you live in right now. By the time most men realize what's happening, the ritual is already complete. They look back over their lives and start to see the pattern, how every major decision was framed with the same emotional structure: fear, guidance, obedience, silence. The fear could be anything: economic collapse, moral panic, illness, conflict. The guidance always feels reassuring: here is the correct path. Obedience becomes a virtue, and silence, well, silence becomes a duty. That is how empires are built, not through brute strength alone, but through ritualized compliance, repeated until it feels like morality itself. Black Hollow is not unique for having a witch. Every civilization has one. They just change the name. In Rome, she was called Fides, the spirit of unquestioning loyalty. In the Soviet Union, she appeared in posters demanding absolute trust in the party. In modern times, she appears as the greater good, broadcast endlessly until men confuse submission with heroism. Different costume, same function, same ritual. And here is the brutal truth: those in power hope you never realize. The ritual can't be destroyed, but it can be broken. How? By refusing to participate, by recognizing the melody for what it is, a psychological lure, and stepping away from it, even when everything in you wants to follow. The men of Black Hollow never took that step. They listened, they followed, they obeyed, but you still have a choice. And that's why this moment is critical, because what comes next in the story isn't about the witch. It's about what a man does when he finally sees the structure and realizes, if I keep listening, I become part of it. You've made it past the threshold. That alone puts you in the minority, the very small group of men who prefer unsettling truth over comfortable illusion. But the deeper we go, the less metaphorical this becomes. Because at this level, the story of Black Hollow is no longer about them. It's about what happens to a man when he finally sees the ritual and must decide what to do with that knowledge. Let's be clear, knowing the truth doesn't free you. It only gives you the opportunity to free yourself. The witch didn't disappear when the men recognized her. She grew stronger, because recognition without resistance is the final step of consent. The sheriff saw her and did nothing. The families heard the lullaby and stayed silent. The authorities removed all evidence and called it order, and that is exactly how the ritual survives generation after generation, not by hiding, but by persuading good men to do nothing. So now we turn to you. What will you do with the realization that control hides inside ritual, that fear is engineered, and that obedience is the currency of an invisible empire stretching back centuries? Will you bury this knowledge like the townspeople did, pretend it's just a legend, close the page and return to sleep? Or will you finally ask the one question the system never wants spoken aloud: who benefits from my obedience? And what happens if I refuse? Because that question is a weapon. That question breaks spells. That question is the one thing the witch cannot sing over. And once a man asks it, sincerely, relentlessly, the ritual begins to crumble. Even Black Hollow itself reacts. In 2018, a historian researching the disappearance reportedly asked that exact question aloud while standing at the ravine. Moments later, the lullaby stopped for the first time in 44 years. He left the forest unharmed. No one has explained why. If the ritual can be interrupted simply by refusing to participate, why don't more men do it? Because refusal requires courage, and courage requires clarity. Most people never develop either. They walk through life in a semi-conscious state, absorbing whatever melody is playing around them, mistaking it for their own thoughts. That's why the witch appears faceless. It's not that she has no identity. It's that her identity is built from yours, from every unspoken fear, every surrendered instinct, every moment you chose comfort over conviction. What happens in Black Hollow is dramatic only because it's concentrated. In most places, the ritual works slowly, incrementally, invisibly. You don't wake up in a ravine surrounded by a singing chorus of children. You wake up 30 years later and realize you've built your entire life on beliefs you never examine rituals you never questioned. That is the modern form of the witch's song, and that is why very few men ever escape it, because the melody adapts to your level of resistance. Ignore it, and it grows louder. Rationalize it, and it becomes more persuasive. Fear it, and it becomes compassionate, offering protection and belonging in exchange for obedience. There is only one posture it cannot mimic: conscious defiance, not reckless rebellion, not blind anger, but the calm, unwavering refusal to participate in any ritual designed to harvest your awareness. That is what breaks the pattern. That is what the men of Black Hollow never did. They reacted, they prayed, they panicked, but they never refused. There are documents, quietly passed between certain academics, never publicly cited, that suggest the Black Hollow event was observed by external actors, not by paranormal investigators, but by individuals connected to high-level psychological research programs. One private field report from 1975, never released to the public, contains a single chilling line: successful deployment, emotional entrainment achieved, recommend replication in alternate environments. That's when it becomes undeniable. Black Hollow wasn't just tolerated, it was studied. They monitored how fear spread through the population, how individuals turned against anyone who questioned the official story, how the community willingly erased its own memory in exchange for normalcy. That is data, and data becomes policy. So do you really think the lullabies stayed in the forest? Or do you think it was refined, digitized, and reintroduced through devices most people carry in their pockets today? The modern man scrolls through his feed and says, "I can't look away. I don't even know why." That is the lullaby. He watches disaster after disaster, engineered outrage after outrage, and every time he does, he becomes more afraid, more passive, more obedient. Until eventually, he's not living anymore. He's complying. If that sounds extreme, ask yourself this: when was the last time you made a decision that was entirely your own, not influenced by fear, not conditioned by policy, not shaped by public expectation? Most men can't answer that, and that's how you know the ritual is no longer local, it's global. The witch doesn't stand in a forest anymore. She stands behind every screen, humming softly, waiting for you to accept the melody. This is the part most men avoid. Not because it's the scariest, but because it demands responsibility. You've now seen how the ritual works. You've seen that the witch isn't just a monster, she's a system that thrives on silent acceptance and voluntary obedience. So here is the real question: what happens when a man refuses to sing? In Black Hollow, no one tried. Not one man stood in front of the ravine and said no. They either fled or followed. But refusal, true, conscious refusal, never happened. That is why the ritual completed successfully. This is what they fear the most: not rage, not violence, but a man who looks directly into the abyss and does not flinch. A man who watches the lullaby unravel in front of him and chooses silence over submission. A man who refuses to provide the emotional energy the system needs to function. Because that kind of man breaks the circuit. Some would call that insanity. But the truth is, sanity inside a corrupted system is just another form of obedience. The only sane response to a world built on controlled fear is to reject the fear. Not by pretending it doesn't exist, but by recognizing the purpose behind it and refusing to let it dictate your movement. That's how the ritual ends, not with a battle, with a decision. And once a single man makes that decision, others begin to wake up too. The melody weakens, the system loses its hold, even the witch fades. Not destroyed, simply starved, because her power was never her own. It came from the men who believed she had it. Once you understand that, everything begins to look different. You no longer fear the forest, because you finally grasp that the real danger was never the ravine, or the woman in black, or even the lullaby itself. The danger was forgetting who you are in the presence of those things, losing the ability to choose. That's why the witch watches silently from the tree line, why she never rushes forward or attacks. She waits. Because the ritual only works when you take the first step. In 2018, when the historian spoke the forbidden question into the ravine, the singing stopped. Not because he held some sacred power, but because, for the first time in decades, someone stood before the ritual without fear, without obedience, and without the desire to bargain. The system didn't know what to do with that. It wasn't written into the pattern. And that's what you need to remember now. The pattern is powerful, but it is not invincible. It was built for predictable men, men who crave safety, men who follow the path because everyone else does. It has no defense against the man who remains fully conscious in the face of fear, the man who hears the melody and refuses to call it beautiful. That man breaks the inheritance. He ends the generational agreement in his bloodline. He refuses to pay the debt passed down by those who surrendered before him. And when even one man does that, the ritual begins to fail. The witch steps back. The forest grows quiet. The children's voices fade into memory, not because the darkness is gone, but because it lost its permission. And that is the hidden truth behind every forbidden history. Darkness doesn't win by strength. It wins by agreement. By now you should see the pattern stretching far beyond Black Hollow. Every legend, every unsolved disappearance, every whispered story of haunting is a reflection of the same system. It is a network of fear and compliance, operating quietly, often unnoticed, waiting for the next generation to repeat the same mistakes. The witch in the forest is a symbol, a concentrated example, but the principles extend into every institution, every family, every town where unquestioned obedience thrives. Notice how few people speak openly about the truth. Notice how many stories are sanitized, lost, or altered to maintain comfort. That is intentional. Those who control the narrative ensure the melody never loses its hold. And yet, every now and then, someone hears the song differently. Someone questions, resists, and refuses to participate. That is the spark of awareness that the system cannot control. One man's clarity can ripple outward, disturbing generations of ingrained obedience. This is why the Black Hollow case continues to fascinate and terrify. It is a perfect illustration of human behavior when confronted with the unknown. The missing children, the faceless witch, the hidden rituals, all are masks for a deeper truth. Power only exists where submission is given. Now consider yourself in this story. Are you merely a witness? Or are you someone who will refuse the song? Because even as you watch, even as you listen, the melody is evaluating your response. It notices hesitation, doubt, and the instinct to conform. The choice is yours, to surrender to the unknown or to stand fully aware, to join the cycle or to break it. The forest, the witch, the vanished children, they are not just history, they are a mirror, and they are watching. Time has passed, but the echoes remain. Modern technology, screens, and constant connectivity act as new paths for the same ritual. The witch no longer needs the ravine or the trees to reach her audience. She only needs attention, fear, and the willingness to follow. Reports of strange phenomena near Black Hollow continue to surface. Footsteps where no one walks, whispers in empty rooms, fleeting shadows at 3:07 a.m. The precise time the children vanished. Each report is dismissed by the skeptical, but quietly verified by those who track the pattern. The forest and its inhabitant do not forgive disbelief. The old paths have grown over, but the energy of the place lingers. Every generation adds to it, stories retold, fear internalized, curiosity restrained. Even those who never enter the woods carry its influence, an unseen pressure shaping their decisions, their reactions, their obedience. And now, the final lesson emerges. The witch is not a creature. She is a system of behavior and belief. She thrives when men forget their autonomy, when they accept the world as it is without question, when they follow patterns laid out before them. But resistance, awareness, and deliberate choice are the antidote. The moment a man refuses to yield, the spell falters. The trees may still whisper, the shadows may linger, but their power depends on surrender, not courage. Every story, every haunting, every disappearance is a test. Who will take control of their own mind, and who will hand it over to fear? Black Hollow was never just a forest. It was a mirror, a proving ground, and a warning. And now the question comes back to you. Will you follow the melody, or will you resist it? Will you watch history repeat, or will you step off the path before it consumes you? The choice is yours. The forest waits, silent yet alive, patient as ever. Every fallen leaf, every shadow cast by moonlight, holds a memory of those who were drawn in, and those who resisted. Some nights the lullaby drifts far beyond the tree line, carried by wind and rumor, reaching ears in distant towns. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, but those who listen carefully can hear the underlying pattern, the call and the response, the trap disguised as song. You might think distance protects you. You might believe that because you have never seen it, touched it, or walked its paths, you are safe. But Black Hollow is not a place. It is a concept, a system embedded in the human mind, in fear, in obedience, in the stories we dare not question. The witch endures because men continue to participate in her ritual, consciously or not. She has no need for magic. She only needs compliance, and every generation offers it willingly, reinforcing the cycle, strengthening the melody, and ensuring that the vanishings continue. Yet the pattern is not absolute. The few who resist, who refuse to follow, weaken her hold, disrupt the rhythm, and introduce cracks into her control. The forest does not forgive easily, but even it cannot force the mind to surrender. Choice, the conscious act of refusal, is the only weapon. As you listen to this story, understand that you are now part of it. Your attention, your fear, your curiosity, all are measured, evaluated, and catalogued. The moment you act deliberately, consciously, and refuse to submit, the melody falters and the system loses its grip. And perhaps, just perhaps, you can walk away untouched. But the forest never forgets. It observes, it waits, and it remembers. The final moments of awareness are the most dangerous. This is when the forest whispers directly to the mind, when the lullaby reaches beyond sound and touches memory, desire, and instinct. You begin to question, is it real? Is it safe? Should you step closer or run? Every second of hesitation feeds the system. Every doubt strengthens its hold. The witch does not need to act. She simply lets you weigh yourself against fear, knowing that most will surrender. History shows us the consequences. Men enter the forest seeking answers and vanish. Families are torn apart. Communities are silenced. The melody plays on. But there is a choice. Every man who recognizes the pattern, who stands firm against the instinct to obey blindly, weakens the cycle. Every act of consciousness, every refusal to participate, is a rebellion against centuries of manipulation. And now, the final warning comes. If you hear the singing, if shadows move where no one should be, if curiosity tempts you, pause, do not respond, do not follow. Because the forest will not release you, not once it has recognized your attention. This is why the Black Hollow case endures. Not because of monsters, not because of witches, not even because of the children. It endures because the truth is dangerous, and because those who remember it are rarely the same again. Your mind is now a part of the story, whether you accept it or not. The choice to surrender or resist lies in your hands, the last line of defense against the ritual that never sleeps. Now the story closes, but the forest remains. Black Hollow does not end. It merely waits, silent, patient, eternal. The witch, the vanished children, the lullaby, they are symbols of a truth older than the town itself. Fear, obedience, and curiosity have been exploited for generations, and they will continue to be as long as men forget to question what lies beneath the surface. The disappearances are not just events, they are lessons, warnings, mirrors of human weakness and the consequences of ignoring it. Those who venture too far, those who listen too closely, are consumed not by the forest itself, but by their own inattention, their willingness to follow without thought. The true horror is not the witch, it is the surrender of the mind. And now, you, the listener, the witness, the participant in this retelling, must decide. Will you allow the melody to guide you? Will you let curiosity drag you into repetition, or will you step away, fully aware, refusing the ritual that has claimed so many before? The Black Hollow forest watches. The shadows wait. The children remain, tied to a story that never truly ends. And somewhere in the distance, the faintest notes of a lullaby drift on the wind. A reminder that history is alive, that fear persists, and that the system never sleeps. You have heard the story. The rest is your choice. And remember this: awareness is the only way to survive where others vanish. The screen goes dark, but the echo lingers. The forest never forgets. The song never ends.